ladies and gentlemen. Look out there, isn't it wonderful? Melbourne on a spring morning, there's no better place to be. And it's nice to be back in town. You wouldn't know from just looking out of the window and looking at life warming up on such a morning of the kind of turmoil that's going on around the world. If you look at what's happening around the world, sometimes you'd be very confused whether you're talking about the economy, because we're heading into another kind of recession globally, and the next crisis will probably be deeper and affect more people than it did last time. Why will it happen? And I can't tell you when it will happen. It will happen, but why? Because none of the structural underpinnings of the global monetary system have been fixed. In fact, they're probably worse than they were before the crisis 2008. So we're in for another one at some stage, and that shock will impact Australian businesses far more than the last one. So you look around the world and you think, my goodness, how can we sort out the truth from opinion and what is happening? I want to try and give you my impression of what's actually happening and why it's happening and what you need to be awake to in terms of business to really be ahead of the curve so that you can actually thrive and prosper from what is happening around the world. And this is possible. And what people don't realize is that we are in a very kind of confused transition between one kind of society and another kind of society. The world we have come from, which you can call the world of industrial economism, which started at the last revolution, which was the Industrial Revolution, effectively. So we've been living in this environment for the past 200 to 300 years. No wonder we're used to it. We've developed habits in business that are aligned to that way of living, those kinds of expectations and assumptions about what business is and what's important and what's not. Same with government. But we're now moving into a world that is utterly different, and we're impacted by pressures and events that are causing that change. Now, if you look at the media, all you hear about is doom and gloom. That's really not very, very helpful. In business, you need certainty and you need hope. Look at the retailing situation in here. If retailing is a kind of canary in the coal mine, there's a lot about to happen which we need to be very aware of. So I want to give you my impression. My impression is a company of around 300 thought leaders and analysts and thinkers who've come to these conclusions. We are a world in transition. Now, the reason I've got this picture up here is look at the motor car, and some of you will have heard of the company River Simple. This is the River Simple car. River Simple have designed an entirely new solution for personal urban transportation. And instead of going for a hybrid vehicle, they've solved all the problems that some of the big car companies say cannot be solved in actually transitioning to a hydrogen economy, where there are zero emissions. And it's not just the car, which is made out of composite materials that can be totally recycled. You don't buy the car, you lease it like you have a contract with a mobile phone, for example, so you continually get upgrades, you get the fuel as well, and the whole system is redesigned from scratch. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And you might say to me, well, yes, of course you'd pick that as an example because you're a futurist. This system is being piloted, trialled, in 2 cities in the UK this year, Oxford and Nottingham. And it's going to be scaled up very, very quickly. Why? Because the design is open source. In other words, anyone can access the design. There are no secrets. It's low batch manufacturing. So anywhere in the world can set up a factory. There are no capital costs of barrier to entry. So I would advise you, if you're interested in how you redesign the whole system for the world we're moving into, to look at this as an example and Google River Simple, or actually it's very simple, riversimple.com. So what is this world in transition about, and what are the things we should be concerned about. I want to tell you a story. Paul Gilding, a great Australian, lives in Tasmania, was the international CEO of Greenpeace a few years ago. He's still pretty young. Has written a book called The Great Disruption. When I was born in 1945, the world had just under 2 billion people. This October, roughly, we hit 7 billion people. And on that track, by the year 2050, we hit about 9.1, 9.2 billion people, and we're still living on the same planet with the same resources, in fact, fewer resources. And this 7 billion people around the world, and remember, I travel all the time, I hardly see any difference between people in Soweto or southern India, Southeast Asia or Brazil, and here in terms of what we want. And we're all addicted to wanting more stuff. And it's a real crisis. That has led to a pressure on systems. I'm talking about water, the availability of water, which increasingly over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be difficult. Food, the cost, you notice the cost of food in supermarkets? Then oil, the fossil fuel industry, of course, oil, coal, gas. There's a crisis in that industry because we're saying we need to move to renewable sources of energy, and so there's a crisis as well. Now, obviously, that has led to a culture of blame. We blame other people now. It's always the other. And that in itself is a crisis because we need to collaborate. We need to cooperate with each other more than we ever have before. And it's a bit of a misnomer that people think we're competitive because we have competition policy, etc., etc. But in fact, if you listen to human beings' language, and if you look at the way we socialize, and if you look at the things that are important to us, you realize that cooperation is just as important as competition, and you need both for a healthy environment. The final crisis is actually one of individual loneliness or alienation from everything that's going on. Pressure on us as individuals is sometimes excruciating. The general kind of feeling around them that there is no hope in the future. So these are the 4 crises facing us, but they're also opportunities. You know the classic Chinese ideogram for change. There are 2 parts of that. This is not strictly true, but it's interpretation. But one ideogram means crisis. The other ideogram in change means opportunity. And in business, and always in any situation, including the one we're in at the moment, there are opportunities. What are those opportunities? The opportunities are there for people who are awake to the opportunities, not if you're asleep. Unfortunately, Australia at the moment mostly is asleep because there is no burning platform. Again, look out there. This is a wonderful way of life. We have a wonderful quality of life in Australia, but that too is a difficulty because it makes us lazy. If you look at the levels of productivity and efficiency in your businesses, what we've done is taken our eye off the ball for the past 5 to 8 years. Why? Because of the commodities boom. Everything's going well in mining, resources, energy, fossil fuel industry, yes, but it's all going well. We're riding on that, and we've taken our eyes off the ball in terms of efficiency, particularly in work productivity. This is why this morning is so useful to you when Wolfgang gets up and tells you about technologies, because technology today is an enabler to enable you to do things in a productive way, an efficient way, which you've never been able to do before. And that's startlingly new and startlingly important. But whereas the old revolutions have been about things and tangible things you can touch, the revolution today is more about a new consciousness, a new awareness of the opportunities that exist in business and an opportunity to see that the world we're moving into is different. How different? I want to contrast the 3 life-critical systems, in other words, human enterprise, energy, how we use it, where it comes from, and the environment, our relationship to the environment. Those are the 3 life-critical systems we need to take into account. with the typical business. So over the past 100 or so years, business has been a law unto itself. Profits and shareholder value have been the focus for most business. And I'm not saying that's still not the case. I'm saying this has been the history of business. This is the world we're in. Unfortunately, that to me is an unconscious business. If you look at all the successful, most resilient, most innovative businesses around the world, they're beginning to develop characteristics which are not these. The reverse case is true, that if you're not awake to new possibilities, you're like that guy with his head in the sand, really unconscious of what is happening all around you. Tomorrow's business is going to be very different. Why? Because the environment will have changed significantly. The economy in which we undertake enterprise of one kind or another will have changed. We are moving, inevitably, to a low-carbon economy and probably to a low-growth or a no-growth economy. The conversations that are occurring today and tomorrow and next week in the corridors of power, where it matters, where systems are being redesigned and reconceptualized, we are talking about a different kind of global monetary system not based on debt. Why? Because look around you. Look at the failing states in Europe. Look at your personal credit card debt. Look at the way debt has brought the US to its knees, and we see an empire in decline. Debt is one of the things that needs to change. We need to take debt out of the equation. Those conversations are happening. So the economy will change, allowing human enterprise to change. Energy. Energy will change. Whether you believe in climate change or not, in terms of the environment, it doesn't really matter. There is no debate. Science tells us that it is happening. It is happening in a whole range of factors, about 31 factors, and the environment will change because of that. We will shift to renewable energy, the quicker the better, and we will develop a different kind of relationship with the environment and with each other. We have to. So the conscious business, the business you should be developing now and designing now, has different characteristics. These characteristics, much more socially aligned. Your intention should be much more socially aligned with the real needs of society. And you should be bringing customers into your organization to co-design with you your products, your services, and even who you are. You need to move out of being just a brand, into a love mark where the whole experience of working with you is a real joy. It creates a different kind of business experience. Your research and development will probably be different because R&D now occurs in the cracks. It's a networked phenomenon. It just doesn't occur within an enterprise. It occurs within the networks you have. Your organizations in the future will be designed for speed and adaptiveness particularly, because as the environment quickens up and change quickens up, you will need to adapt very, very quickly indeed in terms of what you do and how you do it. You need to be fleet of foot. But your investments are not any longer in what you do, but rather in what you know. That's the conscious business of tomorrow. And hopefully you recognize those characteristics and you're developing those characteristics today.